Senator Wielechowski was first elected in 2005 to serve in the State Senate. He currently is the chair of the Senate State Affairs Committee, co-chair of the Joint Armed Services Committee, and also vice chair of the Senate Judiciary and Resources Committee. He has been recognized as one of the top 40 under 40 by the Alaska Chamber of Commerce in 2005. He also serves on the Northeast Community Center Board and the Alaska Association of Administrative Law Judges. He obtained his Juris Doctorate degree from Seton Hall University School of Law in 1992. Please help me welcome Senator Bill Wielechowski.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and speak before you today. I've spoken here before, and it's always an honor to have the chance to come out and talk. I guess the most pressing issue before the legislature this year, as it's been, quite frankly, for the last few years since I've been elected, has been oil taxes. And there's a lot of confusion about what the tax bill does, what it doesn't do. And so I've put together this presentation. I've done it probably 100 times, I'm guessing. And just to try to get people aware of what exactly our current structure is doing and whether or not we really need to change it drastically like is being proposed by the governor. So our tax structure is called ACES, Alaska's Clear and Equitable Share. And I guess one of the biggest things that you hear out there is that because of our new oil tax structure, where it's killing production in Alaska, right? And so ACES was put into place in 2007, which is right about here. And you have this period of time. This is the decline curve for North Slope oil from the time we started producing oil. It peaked in 1988, and then, as you can see, it's been on a steady decline since 1988. In fact, about 5.2% every single year. So I think this is one of the biggest myths that exists out there, is that somehow this new tax structure has all of a sudden caused the decline in oil production. And you can see the tax structure didn't come into place until right about here. Now, nobody's happy with continuing production declines, but it certainly wasn't caused by this because we didn't have it in effect at the time. In fact, the governor's bill seeks to roll back oil taxes. The progressivity portion of it is about $2 billion per year. The net effect to Alaskans at current oil prices is about $1.5 billion a year. We passed the governor's oil tax bill. We push $1.5 billion per year over to the oil industry. And so the philosophy is low taxes will lead to more investment. Low taxes will put more oil in the pipeline. Well, here's the thing. You have an experiment from 1988 until the present, until 2006. During this time period, almost 30 years, anybody know what the tax rate was on the North Slope, the production tax rate? It was 0% for the vast majority of the fields. The few fields that did pay taxes paid a tax rate of about 12.5%, okay? And I'm talking Prudhoe, Kuparuk, Alpine. They paid about 12.5%. So the philosophy was, back in the 80s, if you have low taxes, it will lead to a boom in production. This is what happened. We didn't get that boom in production. In fact, we had a decline of 5.2% per year. Hopefully that's a little better. Okay, so now let's look at another field, which is Kuparuk, second largest oil field in North America, Kuparuk. And what you see here is the way we structured the old tax structure called the ELF, the new fields paid zero taxes. So by 2006, 15 out of 19 fields were paying zero taxes. The legacy fields, the large fields like Kuparuk, like Prudhoe Bay, when they became, quote, marginal, then we started to drop the tax rates on them. And again, the philosophy was low taxes. If we lower the taxes on these massive fields, we'll produce more oil. And so we have another 10-year real-time experiment in Alaska with low taxes in our major producing fields. Here's what happened. In 1996, we lowered the tax rate in Capark, was about 12.5%. We started lowering it every single year down to 0%. And again, you would think, zero taxes, production is going to go through the roof, because at this time, oil prices are hitting historic highs. Oil prices went from $18 a barrel to about $60 a barrel during this time frame. Well, look what happened. Just the opposite. In fact, you had production declining about 8%, 7.1% per year. So the philosophy failed. What did it cost us? Well, one thing you can look at as an example is to look at Norway. Because Norway came to Alaska 19 years after they discovered oil. They said, we want to have a permanent fund also. And so 19 years after ours, they set up their permanent fund. We started ours in 1977. They started theirs in 1996. And look at the difference in the permanent fund. Norway, with 19 less years, 7 billion less barrels, and just by the way, the permanent fund just put out a press release. Our permanent fund now is worth $45 billion, which is fantastic. Norway's permanent fund, this is 2 years old. Norway, a year and a half old. Norway's permanent fund 2 years ago was $570 billion. It's now up to $700 billion. So the tax structure that we had in place, the zero taxes, we have literally been giving away tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars to the oil industry and getting nothing in return. No more production, no more investment, nothing. It's been a horrific tax policy. And now you have people in the governor's office, people in the legislature who want to go back to that policy. It's bad policy. Okay, so you've all heard investment on the North Slope. We have to lower taxes again because investment, no one's investing in Alaska, right? You've probably all heard that. Well, here's the facts. 2012, we had record spending on the North Slope. This is capital spending, by the way. Capital spending is money that you spend to put new oil in the pipeline. It's for seismic tests. It's for drilling tests. $2.4 billion of capital spending. We have never had that much spending in the history of the state of Alaska on the North Slope. And another interesting aspect is we can look from 2001 to 2004-05. You have oil prices rising here. You have tax rates declining here. And look what happens. We went from investments of $1.6 billion down to almost half, $985 billion. They started to go up a little bit. But ever since we passed ACES, we've had record highs in capital investment on the North Slope. The reason is because ACES encourages investment. The philosophy was simple. We said, if you're going to take our money, and they were making huge profits in Alaska, if you're going to take our money and invest it in countries like Libya and Nigeria, we're going to tax you higher. But if you reinvest it in Alaska, we're going to give you significant tax breaks. And you can see, it has done exactly as we proposed, because they are significant investments in Alaska. And what is the magnitude of those investments? Well, does anyone know who the largest investor is on the North Slope? State of Alaska. Some people say Exxon, BP. No, it's the state of Alaska, because we offer massive tax credits and deductions. In fact, the most generous in the world, according to our experts. Here's what we do. This is not my slide, by the way. This is a slide produced by Governor Parnell several years ago. Not my gnome, not my polar bear. But here's what it shows. On an unsuccessful development project for an existing producer, BP, Conoco, Exxon, the state picks up 76% of the costs. So if you have a $100 million project, the state of Alaska is paying $76 million of that project. The feds, through tax breaks and deductions, our corporate income tax breaks, are picking up 8%. The company picks up a whopping 15%. So in light of the massive contributions by the state, it is only fair that we get a fair share for our oil. So, you've also heard, well, everyone's leaving Alaska, right? No one's doing business in Alaska. Everyone's going to North Dakota, Texas. Well, here's the facts. In 2008, the first year after ACES passed, you had 18 tax returns filed by oil and gas companies. 2009, you had 26. 2010, you had 47. 2011, you had 69, a 383% increase under ACES. So the next myth is that, well, we can pass ACES and it really won't affect what happens to our state, right? We'll just sort of skate by. Well, here's how much money we're talking about, because there are a lot of people in the legislature who wanted to keep our old tax structure called the ELF. Had we kept that in place, we would be $20 billion poorer today. Had we kept the old PPT tax structure, for which 10% of the legislature was indicted, we would be about $9 billion poorer today. Our savings account now is $16.5 billion, the largest savings account in the United States, by far. No one even close. And so if you pass the governor's oil tax bill, you are giving billions of dollars of our money to the oil industry. Next thing I want to talk about is jobs, because one of the things you hear is, well, all the jobs are leaving Alaska. And I know you don't get a lot of oil company jobs down here in Southeast, but this is a big argument we hear. And here's what's going on. This is the jobs before ACES, before tax reform. This is the jobs after. All-time highs. In fact, this is where we are today. We have never had as many people working in the oil industry as we do today. Not even close. And so, again, you look back to 2001 through 2006, what was happening? We were actually losing jobs. Zero tax rates on 15 out of 19 fields, declining tax rates in the largest oil fields in North America. We were losing jobs. And just to put it in perspective, you can go back to 1990, you had 5,500, 5,400 people working on the North Slope. You have over 13,300 people working up on the North Slope. They're hot sheeting on the North Slope today. Hot sheeting means they will pay you to let someone else sleep in your bed on the North Slope because they don't have enough beds to house the people they have. Okay, so the next thing here is, well, the oil companies, Alaska is just not a profitable place to do business, right? You've all heard that. Well, let's look at the facts. This is BP's profits in Alaska since we passed ACES, $12.1 billion in profits. This is Conoco's profits, $12.1 billion. Exxon doesn't report that information. In fact, I asked Exxon a couple years ago on a Senate Resources Committee, how much do you make in Alaska? They said, well, we don't keep track of that information. And I said, you don't keep track of that information? You have no idea how much you make in Alaska? And they said, well, we don't, that's not something that we account for. And I said, what do? Just get a big pile of cash and throw it in a drawer and say, well, I guess we did pretty well in Alaska. And I mean, it's just stunning. But we believe it's roughly the same as BP and Exxon. And so the three oil companies since we passed ACES have made over $36 billion in profits. So when people say Alaska is not a profitable place to do business, that is factually incorrect, according to their SEC statements. And so let's compare, because the other thing here is, well, Alaska is not competitive with lower 48. Okay, well, let's look at the lower 48. This is ACES, this is profit in Alaska, $1.7 billion in 2010 versus $1 billion in lower 48, $2 billion in 2011 versus $1.2 billion in 2011 in the lower 48, $2.3 billion in just this past year versus $713 million in the lower 48. That's where Texas, that's their investments in Texas and North Dakota. They're making far more in Alaska than they are in the lower 48. In fact, 13% of ConocoPhillips' worldwide oil and gas production comes from Alaska. It generates 34% of their worldwide profits. Alaska is one of the most profitable places in the world, as demonstrated by ConocoPhillips' SEC statement that they just filed several weeks ago. And you can see this is how they report their SEC, Securities Exchange Commission. This is document filed under oath. Here's what we find. Profit per barrel. Well, in Canada, they lost $9.73 per barrel, right? In the lower 48, they made $6.15. Their total global average is $17.27. In Alaska, they made $29.20 per barrel. One of the most profitable places in the world for ConocoPhillips. So this is some interesting statements. I don't know if these guys think we don't have access to the internet or what, but ConocoPhillips on March 23rd, 2011, we're in the middle of a heated debate on oil taxes, and they're saying Alaska is a terrible place to do business. We can't make any money there. And so, lo and behold, we pull up, and I have my staff call in, and we listen in on, we pull up the minutes from a conference they have in New York City, March 23rd, 2011. And they're asked about Alaska. Here's what they say. Alaska has, and this is a direct quote, strong cash margins and very good rates of return. 2 weeks later, the CEO of ConocoPhillips flies his private jet to Alaska and says, you guys are a terrible place to do business. We need billions of dollars in tax breaks. I'm like, well, what did you mean when you said we have very good rates of return? And so one of the things they say is, well, Alaska, yeah, okay, you make a lot of money there, but the rate of return is better elsewhere. That's another argument they say. Well, but they won't tell us how much they make. They won't tell us what their rates of return are. So we hired a consultant a few years ago, same as under Governor Palin, same consultant used by Governor Parnell, Gaffney & Klein. They do business for predominantly oil companies. And we asked them, what's the rate of return? If you put your money in a bank account today, you're lucky if you make 1%, right? You put in a 5-year CD, maybe you get 2%. You put your money in the stock market, a good rate of return is 8%. That's a really good, consistent rate of return. The rate of return for ConocoPhillips, or for BP at Prudhoe Bay, 123% under current tax structure. That's a pretty good rate of return, right? That's pretty decent. That's at $80 a barrel oil. Now, this was a Department of Revenue, State of Alaska slide. So now, Parnell has a new expert who is trying to persuade us that Alaska's a terrible place to do business and we got to cut taxes. And so they've redone the numbers, and here's what they've done. This is a slide just presented by a group called Econ One, and they presented this a week or two ago. And this is, again, internal rate of return. This is how much money, what percent profit you're going to make. If you invest $100, or if you make $6, that's a 6% rate of return. Well, here's what they found. A little complicated slide, but the blue here is ACEs. And so you see at $70 barrel oil, it's a 20% rate of return. Okay? And then it goes up. Up. And then we're right now close to $120. So $120, the rate of return is about 78%, according to Parnell's own experts just last week. Now, the interesting thing about this slide is that this compares us to North Dakota, which is called the Bakken Shale Reserve, and Eagle Ford, which everyone always says, you got to compete with North Dakota. You got to compete with Texas. Okay, let's see how we're doing. This dashed line here is the rate of return at Eagle Ford. We follow it almost identically. In fact, our better rate of return in this little gap here. And then we have a drop-off down to 50% between $120 and $140. And then actually it starts to tail up. We have a rate of return almost identical to Eagle Ford in Texas. This is the interesting one, though, to me, is this line here. Because this line here is the rate of return in the Bakken Shale Reserve in North Dakota. Everyone says North Dakota is the place to do business. We have a much higher rate of return, according to Governor Parnell's own experts, than in North Dakota. This dashed line is, and so this line right here is for incumbents, existing producers, BP, Conoco, Exxon. This is for new producers. And so what you see here, and we've actually come to agreement. We think we need to do a little bit better for our new producers. And so we support changes in the tax structure for new producers, new oil. But to give tax breaks for the existing producers in legacy fields makes no sense at all. Just by comparison, here's a similar rate of return slide for Alaska, again, same, versus Canada, the Canadian tar sands, extremely low rates of return. So next question, okay, how do our tax rates compare? You hear some people say Alaska's got a 90% tax rate. Some people say all different things. Well, Alaska's the most highly taxed region in the world. Well, here's a slide that was, it's produced in 2006, but I don't think the numbers have changed much. In fact, if anything, some of these numbers have increased. But what you see here is this is a slide produced by Chevron, and we used this during our ACES debate in 2006. The long and short, what you see in the blue is the tax rate that was in 2006. What you see in the red is the tax rate in 2002. What this is showing is countries all over the world were changing their tax structure, increasing the government take from 2002 to 2006 because oil prices were increasing. And so what you see here is Libya, for instance. Muammar Gaddafi increased his tax rate from government take from 82% to 95%. Hugo Chavez increased his tax rate from about 85% to about 95%. Algeria, where you just had the hostage crisis, 80 people killed, increased their taxes significantly to 90%. China, over 90%. Alaska's not on here, but if Alaska were on here, under our tax structure, we're between about 65 and 75%. So we're right around where Ecuador is. And I would say to you, if we're right around where Ecuador is, that's probably not a bad place to be, because Ecuador, one of the things you have to worry about is getting your assets confiscated like they did in Ecuador. They also confiscated assets in Venezuela. They also confiscated assets in Russia. In Libya, you had to deal with a civil war. In Algeria, you had to deal with 80 hostages being taken and getting killed. So on the whole scheme of things, Alaska's probably not a real terrible place to do business. And in fact, this was a conclusion reached by the governor himself. Back in 2010, he said, in general, the information does not indicate that changes in the tax system have had a direct negative impact on industry activity in the state. In fact, the data would indicate that the investment incentive provisions of ACES are contributing to increased levels of expenditure. So in conclusion, we've had a 20-year experiment in Alaska with low taxes. During that time frame, it did not create new jobs. It did not create new production. It did not create new investment. In fact, we lost production 5.2% per year. Under ACES, you have all-time highs in investments, all-time highs in jobs, all-time highs in the number of companies filing tax returns in Alaska. Expiration has increased. Profits are through the roof. Rates of return are very good. This is not the time to be giving back billions and billions of dollars to the richest, wealthiest corporations in the history of the world and asking for nothing in return. There's not a business in the world that would agree to that. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Stick around for some questions.
I'll go grab a seat.
Thank you very much, Senator. We appreciate that presentation. Now, didn't that make it all clearer? You're going to get a test here in a little bit. He's willing to stick around for some questions after our next presenter, and I would like to introduce her right now. Representative Geran Tarr was born in Akron, Ohio. She has her master's degree in public administration with a focus on policy analysis from the University of Alaska, Anchorage, and is also currently a part of the adjunct faculty in biology there. She's a former chief of staff to Senator Johnny Ellis and was also recognized as a top 40 under 40 by the Alaska Journal of Commerce. And she has tremendous experience in workforce development. Please help me welcome Representative Geran Tarr.
Hello. I'm so excited that I could be here. First, just the invitation was really special, and I was really honored to be invited to come and speak at your forum today, so I want to say thank you very much for that invitation. And additionally, very excited because we were running late with our House floor session, and I thought I wasn't going to get to come at all. So we rushed down here, and I'm hoping I'll go maybe 10 or 12 minutes, and then that way we'll still have some time for questions from Senator Wielechowski. I know people probably have some questions about oil taxes. So I want to just start by introducing myself. Thank you for that kind introduction. And a little bit, my history here is not having grown up in Alaska. But I want to talk about fish today. And when I was thinking about my time in Alaska, protecting our fish and the importance of the fishing industry and subsistence fishing has been a big part of my experience. And so as a fresh out of college grad, I moved up here looking for that adventure that brings many people to Alaska. And I have a science background, so I was looking for those kind of opportunities here. And in the first few days of arriving in Alaska, met some folks who were from a fishing family. And this was just something that was so different to me. Having grown up in the Midwest, we just don't have that kind of, sort of cultural tradition or heritage there. Not that we don't have our own, but this was something that was just something really new and different to me, and I was really taken by it. And I think that's where I've started to fall in love with Alaska. And so as I've lived here and been exposed to the rich culture and traditions of this great state, I've been here going on 15 years now. The importance of fish in our lives has remained a constant. And so now I find myself as a new representative in the Alaska State Legislature, and I'm serving on the Resources Committee. And right now I want to bring your attention to a couple of items that I think are really important and are not getting the attention that they should be and have the possibility of affecting our fish and in all the ways we use fish in our lives. You may have seen just recently the Senate, just yesterday, did the final passage of HB 80, which was the cruise ship bill. And, that bill was moving very, very quickly through the legislature. And unfortunately, I think too quickly for members of the public to even really understand what was going on. And so we were, working on that bill in the Resources Committee, and one of the strong objections we had was the potential to harm fish. And we weren't able to really get enough attention on that, I think. And unfortunately, we weren't able to sort of stop that bill from moving forward. And now, it's made its way through the Senate, and unfortunately, we're not able to stop it there either. And so that's sort of my first experience here in this legislative session where I feel like we have the potential to hurt our fish. And we did receive a letter from Tlingit Haida, and we were pleased to receive that letter, but unfortunately it happened after we had taken the vote. And so I want to talk about these issues because I think it's so important to think about protecting our fisheries, and then also make sure that people become aware that things are moving at a pace during this legislative session that is a little bit unlike the pace I've seen in other legislative sessions. So things happening a lot more quickly. And I think, unfortunately, for all of you who may care about these issues, might not be getting the information fast enough. So cruise ships, unfortunately, we've made that change, and that will happen immediately as soon as the governor signs that bill. And so we have reason to be concerned about how that might affect our fish. The second bill that we're dealing with right now is a bill related to permitting, but certainly on everyone's mind is the importance of the Bristol Bay fishery and how development of the Pebble Mine might impact that fishery and not for the better. And so we're considering another piece of legislation that would make significant changes to the way we deal with permitting and has the potential to impact, again, our fisheries. And in that case, right, I think we all agree that the Bristol Bay salmon fishery is world-class, unlike any other. That bill, again, is moving really quickly. And so, again, my experience of seeing the bill in the Resources Committee is that I think we were hearing the bill, a lot of technical language, a lot of detail to that piece of legislation, but not giving the public an opportunity to really be a part of that conversation. So I want to make sure folks are aware of that. There's another bill in the Senate that is a similar bill, and so they're both kind of moving, and I don't have the number for that one, but I know we could help you out if you called the office and wanted to learn more. But that one has great potential to affect fisheries, and particularly the Bristol Bay salmon fishery. So I hope we can all kind of be on the lookout for that bill and make sure that we're engaged, and want to ask folks to get in touch with our offices. We're not hearing from people very much, and so I think that sometimes people think then that there aren't people, right, that are upset about that issue or kind of following that issue. So hopefully I'll be hearing from a lot of you, right, after we have this little talk today. I'll be looking forward to it. But on a more positive note, why I was just at the floor session and what was holding me up there was I had sponsored a resolution opposing genetically modified salmon. And how many people have heard what's happening at the national level with genetically modified salmon? Some people familiar? A few? This would be a bold move. The Federal Drug Administration is considering allowing genetically modified salmon to be sold in the United States. It would be the first time that the federal government would allow a genetically modified organism to be sold for human consumption. So there are concerns related to human health and what the impact of that would be since we've never done something like that before. There are also concerns about the economic impact to the fishing industry. A lot of Southeast folks here, I'm sure, come from fishing families and those special families that made me fall in love with Alaska. So it has the potential to impact that. If you remember what happened when farm salmon came on the market, at that time really impacted the price of salmon. And since then, for the last 20 years, we've been really working hard to market our Alaska wild salmon, market it for the health benefits. And so we don't want to go back, right? We don't want to have any losses after we've come so far. And then also the threat to the wild salmon stocks. We know that farm salmon often escape, and even though these genetically modified salmon would be reared somewhere else, it has the potential to threaten the wild salmon stocks. And I think that could be probably the most damaging thing, because while you might be able to heal, right, economic losses, really, the loss of that important wild Alaska salmon could potentially never be recovered. And so we had a resolution, House Joint Resolution 5, and I'm pleased to say just 20 minutes ago that resolution passed with unanimous consent. So we're excited. The House has stepped forward. The House has stepped forward and said we oppose this application, and we are encouraging the federal government to say no as well. In doing this, we're joining the governor and our congressional delegation, who have also spoken up and said this is a bad idea for Alaska and we do not support it. But what I would like to do is invite all of you to become a part of the message that Alaskans don't support this. And my staff person here, Monica, who I should introduce and just say thank you and give her a big round of applause for helping me with the resolution. And she has with her some petition forms that we want to pass around, and we want to ask all of you to become a part of our effort in protecting our wild Alaska salmon. It's at the front desk, she's telling me. And so, I see Nancy. Maybe Nancy's grabbing it. Oh, no, Nancy's walking out. Okay. But we will pass that resolution around. I think it's really important. We need to have as aggressive an effort as we can possibly muster to let the federal government know this would be the wrong move and that Alaskans do not support this. So I would be thrilled and just so honored to have folks here sign on to that sort of statement of opposition, and we'll include that. We hope to get the resolution through the Senate. We have just a little bit of time to do this because there's a comment period happening right now where they're accepting comments on this. And so we want to get as many of those comments in, and so they know that Alaskans are paying attention and we're not supporting this. So in that, I'm going to go ahead and end my remarks so we can call Senator Wielechowski back up and see if folks have any questions. But I would be very honored to have you sign that petition form today. I hope to get to know all of you a little bit more when you're up. I see Thule from Representative Christ-Tompkins' office here. And so hopefully you're coming by the Capitol building and you're visiting with that representative. You're always welcome in my office. Please help us do a good job representing all of you. It's really important that we know how you feel about things and where you stand. And I look to the elders to share their wisdom with us and the things they've learned over the years and help me do a good job defending our wild salmon. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Tarr. Now, the floor is open for questions from either Senator Wielechowski or Representative Tarr. Yes, Brad.
Senator, it's interesting that you had pointed out, how much the permanent funds are different. I'd like to know how much of it is earnings versus contributions. But when you look at our permanent fund, 15 of that $40 billion is invested in short-term fixed income securities, earning less than 1%. Our savings account is earning of $16 billion, earning less than 1%. So I question the state cash management. You've got $30 billion earning less than 1%. But then you said if we just simply invested it in stocks, we would earn 8%. And that's over $2.1 billion in just better cash management. So what are you going to do to fix our investment problem with our money we have?
Thank you. Great question, Brad. This issue started to come up a couple of years ago about how we invest our savings, and I know there were some legislators who started to pressure the administration to start investing more in stocks because you're right, we were investing short term, we had very little interest rate. Unfortunately, the timing of that coincided with the crash of the stock market. And so we actually shifted a bunch of money into stocks and we lost a huge amount. Now, it's probably gained it back since then, but this is something I know Senator Stedman and the Finance Committee have focused on. How do you appropriately invest our fundings? We've got a $16.5 billion constitutional budget reserve. You've got a statutory budget reserve of, well, actually, CBR isn't that much. It's probably 11. The SBR is probably around 5 or 6. And the permanent fund is 45. And so the permanent fund, I think, has averaged 8% or so. I think they have met that average. The CBR has been sort of all over the place. I think you're right. There needs to be a harder look at how we invest that. The SBR, I think, is more invested in shorter term, probably getting the 1 or 2% a year returns, because that's money that we want to be somewhat liquid. But I agree, you need to do a better job of the way we're dealing with our investments. I hope it's something that the finance committees take up.